So as the seemingly lifeless Star Wars universe was brought back from the brink in 2012 in the form of the announcement of a new trilogy, people began to wonder if we'd ever see the long-dreamed sequel to the acclaimed Star Wars Battlefront 2, which had been released 7 years earlier back in 2005. In the span of about 30 seconds in June 2014, EA and DICE did what they do and turned the hype dial up to 11. And suddenly, there was a new entry in the beloved series just on the horizon. Too bad it kinda sucked the big one when it came out. Although I definitely had fun on launch and I was blown away by the visuals, the audio and the overall presentation of the game, all you have to do is take a look at my overall playtime to have a bit of an idea of the game's staying power. And so, people complained as they do, saying their chants of "this is why we shouldn't pre-order video games" and "I'm boycotting EA because of this," and then they moved on. Despite the public outcry, the game still sold buckets and it even had the audacity to go on and sell an expensive DLC plan, leaving a bad taste in many players' mouths that wasn't helped by the game's lack of launch content. So after EA had made its money from consumers, they came out and addressed the game's apparent lack of depth, promising to do better for the sequel. But consumers knew what happened last time, and in November of 2017, we got to see what happens when a company doesn't learn from its mistakes. Again. After months of hype involving fancy trailers, promises of free DLC to all players, and some successful beta tests, Battlefront 2 was finally released to players at the end of 2017. And I'm happy to report that consumers had learnt their lesson, and finally started to speak with their wallets. Battlefront 2 was EA's worst selling game in years, with tiny pre-order numbers and completely dead and empty servers on arrival. It was truly a momentous time for consumers of the game industry, and it showed publishers that they could no longer pull the wool over people's eyes and sell a shoddy product to people to make a truckload of money. Well, that's what I would be saying if people had actually learnt anything, which of course they didn't. All that last bit was, as you could say, untrue. People still pre-ordered, and even though the game moved less units than its predecessor, it still sold an eye-watering 9 million copies by the time 2018 rolled around, even though a lot of its consumer base felt EA had wronged them with the first one. And what seems to happen so frequently in the AAA video game space happened again, as EA betrayed whatever consumer trust it had left by including what is probably the most egregious example of a loot box economy in a big budget video game, having objective stat upgrades for characters, weapons and abilities tied to cards only found inside loot boxes, which could be bought with in-game credits or, of course, real money. What this meant is that if you dropped a ton of cash from the game, you would statistically be stronger than other players who hadn't got as many of the cards as you. Obviously, people were outraged with this blatant money grabbing on display, and eventually there was enough of an outcry that EA removed all the microtransactions from the game, and in the process lost $3 billion with a B of stock value. Oh, and also they became the proud holders of the most downvoted Reddit comment in history. Good job, EA. Good job. And EA promised to do better, fix the system, make it right for consumers, etc, etc. All the stuff you'd expect a company like EA to say after they tried to pull something like this. And that's where most people just forgot about Battlefront 2, left as a memory of disappointment and sadness in people's minds. It was a shame too, because the beta tests were actually pretty promising. They had incredible graphics, and in my opinion, were pretty fun as well. Like, imagine being someone who had been waiting for this game specifically for years. A Star Wars game with great graphics, modern controls, all that stuff. You played the beta, you'd seen it take shape just as what you'd been waiting for. And right before you get your hands on it, EA ties you down, throws your prodigy onto the floor in front of you, and makes you watch as they pull out a pistol and shoot it in the back of the head, only to revive it as a Frankenstein of loot boxes and premium currencies. And it was ready to take your wallet and everything in it. So what's the reason for this video then? If Battlefront 2 was such a disappointment, why am I talking about it nearly a year after it came out? Well, after not playing it since the free beta, I was honestly just a bit interested to see what it had become. It had quite a few updates since launch, and after seeing it on sale on Origin for $20, I thought, hey, why not just pick it up and see if they've turned this thing around? Since I didn't actually play the game when the whole loot box fiasco was going on, I won't be focusing on making a comparison between before and after. Instead, I'm just going to be looking at it to see if it was a worthwhile experience now, and whether I was wrong to drop 20 of my hard-earned dollars on it. When first starting it up, I wasn't really quite sure what to expect. Really? I started by playing the first couple of campaign missions, and that is how most people envision a big budget AAA campaign experience to be in a shooter. In short, it was a graphical masterpiece that was pretty shallow and didn't hold my attention for that long, so I skipped it and jumped straight into the meat of the game and the reason I bought it: multiplayer. The game offers the option of land and space battles that feature a variety of maps, characters, weapons, and eras from the Star Wars timeline, that's prequel, original, and sequel trilogies. And I won't dive too deep into the gameplay, but I can say I've honestly had a great time, and so far I haven't been bored like I was with my time in the first Battlefront. The progression system also seems quite fair, as all the unlocks and character buffs now come from leveling up and not random loot boxes. What's really impressed me with Battlefront 2 too is the level of detail present in the game. While it was already great in the original, the sequel has definitely ramped it up, and it may honestly just be the best presented game I've ever played, with the sound and video effects being truly on another level. One thing that actually stood out was the character screens, where you can browse the classes and selection of heroes that the game offers when you're not playing in a match. The little intros the game has for each is just a really nice detail, and it's an example of how the presentation is just top class all around, and everything from this to its soundtracks to its menus. Now, all this would of course mean nothing if the game at this point was dead with no players and no more updates. But luckily, that's mostly not the case. The player base seems to be there, as I've always been put into a full or close to full match, and it looks like there's a good variety of new and experienced players as well, so you don't have to be worried about constantly being smoked by max level enemies. I'm happy to say that DICE and EA also seem to be sticking with the game, with new updates currently being planned and also being released, although the pace and size of them is something that people have criticised pretty harshly. Recently they announced that the next updates will be focusing on the Clone Wars, and see characters like General Grievous, Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan Kenobi join the fray. So, after hearing all that, you're probably thinking that I am going to be recommending Star Wars Battlefront 2 as a buy for you all. And you'd be right. Mostly. I picked this game up for $20. Now if you can do the same, I would say that in my opinion that is 100% no doubt worth the cost. It's fun, it looks great, somehow runs pretty great too on my pretty mid-range hardware, even though a lot of other people have said it actually runs terribly on theirs, so your experience may vary. And now it doesn't gouge your wallet through loot boxes. The game still has its detractors. To see what I mean by that, just jump onto the Star Wars Battlefront subreddit. And those people are not happy with things like the time it takes for updates or fixes, but it's up to you to decide whether that's a concern when you're spending $20 on it. Now at full price, you have to be pretty into Star Wars to buy this over another big budget shooter. Something like Titanfall 2 or Battlefield 4 or 1, I think are better games that can be found for just as cheap or cheaper. And lucky for you, since this game's now a year old, a sale or a permanent reduction is a near certainty if you're looking to pick it up. So, if you want a decently entertaining shooter and you like Star Wars, then don't fear Battlefront 2 too. In my opinion, it's now in a state that's both enjoyable and fair to the players, and that's something that I'm very, very glad that I can say. Thanks for watching.